The headline read, "5 held in a plot to bug Democrats' office here." A front-page article about a break-in at the Democratic National Committee offices in D.C., the story was thought to concern a minor burglary headed by 5 unknown men. Few thought it would be of much interest to the public in the upcoming days. But just a few hours later, a young Washington Post reporter by the name of Bob Woodward was sent to the arraignment of the burglars to follow up on the story. Aided by a fellow reporter, Carl Bernstein, the two eventually uncovered the truth of what occurred in a scandal that infamously came to be known as Watergate. These two reporters relentlessly pursued the facts, ultimately leading to the first and only resignation of an American president. Their work underscored the essential role of a free press in a democratic society. Through its role in uncovering the truth of the Watergate scandal, the Washington Post exemplified the right of a free press to publish without government interference. In doing so, it reaffirmed the responsibility of journalists to keep the public informed of government actions, while simultaneously establishing a new standard for investigative reporting. The early 1970s were a time of significant political and social change in the United States. As the nation grappled with the aftershocks of the Vietnam War and a struggling economy, Americans were growing increasingly skeptical of their government. Trust in public institutions had already begun to erode due to the prolonged and controversial war in Vietnam, and the publishing of the Pentagon Papers reaffirmed the perspective of many that the government was being deceptive to the public. Amid this atmosphere of uncertainty, President Nixon was attempting to get re-elected. His committee for the re-election of the president was officially in charge of fundraising for his campaign. Unofficially, however, it engaged in political sabotage against Nixon's opponents. These tactics weren't unusual for Nixon. He was well known for his aggression against opponents, often using intelligence agencies like the FBI and CIA to conduct surveillance and gather damaging information. This climate of secrecy and hostility toward dissent was what ultimately set the stage for the Watergate scandal. On June 17, 1972, 5 men broke into the Democratic National Headquarters in the Watergate building. Funded by Nixon's Committee for Re-election, they were attempting to wiretap phones and eavesdrop into the conversations of the Democratic Party. Noticed by a security guard, they were discovered by the police and immediately arrested. What was thought to be a minor break-in ultimately became one of the largest political scandals in American history, largely in part because of the work of reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. When the identities of the arrested men were released, Woodward and Bernstein found that one of them, James McCord, was Chief Security Coordinator for Nixon's re-election committee. Further investigation revealed that some of the others had ties to the CIA. Upon these discoveries, the two reporters published an article in the Washington Post highlighting these striking connections just a few days after the initial incident. In response, the White House called the break-in a third-rate burglary, insisting that they had no knowledge or involvement in it. 6 days later, Nixon ordered aides to block an FBI investigation of White House involvement on the grounds that an investigation would endanger national security. This attempted cover-up was what ultimately led to Nixon's downfall. Woodward and Bernstein, noticing the suspicious ties between the Watergate break-in and the federal government, decided to dive deeper and uncover the truth about what really happened. 2 months before the election, they published the first in a series of articles connecting the Watergate break-in to Nixon's administration. These articles, frequently featured on the front page of the Washington Post, discussed the direct involvement of Nixon's intimates in Watergate activities. They demonstrated that the wiretapping and break-in had been financed through illegally laundered campaign contributions, and that the Watergate incident was ultimately a basic strategy of Nixon's re-election effort, orchestrated by top White House officials. In response, Nixon attempted to frame the reporting as the obsession of a single liberal newspaper pursuing a vendetta against the President of the United States. But despite his efforts to discredit the Washington Post reporting, Woodward and Bernstein continued their investigation, carefully verifying their sources and uncovering more connections between the break-in and top White House officials. While many mainstream media outlets were initially hesitant to amplify the story, often dismissing it as speculative, the Post's persistence kept Watergate in the public eye. This commitment eventually paid off when the anchor of CBS Evening News, Walter Cronkite, agreed to present a 2-part overview of the Watergate break-in in the days before the presidential election. Cronkite, widely regarded as the most trusted man in America, brought the Watergate scandal into the national spotlight. His coverage lent credibility to the Post's reporting, forcing other major news outlets to take the scandal seriously. As Cronkite detailed the connections between the break-in and the Nixon administration, public skepticism toward the president began to grow. However, despite these revelations, the Watergate scandal didn't immediately derail Nixon's campaign. With no official legal consequences before Election Day, and the Nixon campaign successfully portraying the controversy as political mudslinging, he won in a landslide victory against Democratic challenger George McGovern. In the months following Nixon's victory, however, the momentum of the Watergate investigation grew. As Woodward and Bernstein continued their reporting, new details emerged that pointed directly to the White House's involvement in orchestrating and covering up the break-in. Despite Nixon's attempts to suppress information by invoking executive privilege to prevent the release of incriminating documents and the testimonies of aides, the Washington Post continued to publish investigative reports. Other media outlets soon joined the effort, and the persistence of the press increased pressure on Congress to take action. Their work, along with mounting legal pressure from federal prosecutors, prompted the U.S. Senate to establish the Senate Watergate Committee in early 1973. This committee, tasked with investigating the scandal, held nationally televised hearings that exposed the extent of corruption to the American public. As public outrage grew, Congress took an increasingly active role in investigating Watergate. Through the Senate committee, the American public became accustomed to watching daily televised hearings. Witnesses, including former White House counsel John Dean, provided condemning testimonies about Nixon's involvement in the cover-up. Dean's revelation that Nixon had a secret recording system was a major turning point in the investigation. The tapes undeniably proved Nixon's direct involvement in covering up the Watergate break-in. When the Supreme Court ruled that Nixon must turn over the tapes, his position became untenable. Facing almost certain impeachment, he resigned on August 8, 1974, becoming the first U.S. president to do so. Watergate had a lasting impact on American politics and public trust in government. Before the scandal, Americans had a strong belief in the integrity of their political leaders. However, the revelations of widespread corruption, illegal surveillance, and abuse of power led to an unprecedented level of cynicism toward government institutions. The ends justify the means attitude present in politicians, along with the culture of illegality in the White House that was exacerbated by the Pentagon Papers, convinced the public of Nixon's guilt. Polls showed a sharp decline in public confidence in the presidency, in a trend that has continued for decades. Most importantly, the scandal reinforced the idea that questioning the government was not only acceptable, but also necessary to uphold democracy. As Watergate became synonymous with political scandal, the public demanded greater transparency for elected officials, leading to a new standard against which political integrity has been judged. Soon after Nixon's resignation, Congress passed several reforms aimed at preventing similar abuses of power. Throughout this whole process, the Washington Post was consistently reporting its findings and testimonies from the Senate's investigating committee. Woodward and Bernstein, aided by FBI agent Mark Felt, uncovered many key details that would eventually become the basis of the Senate committee's investigation. Further, investigative journalism, once a relatively niche field, surged in prominence. The Watergate reporting inspired a new generation of journalists and solidified the press's role as a powerful check on government outreach. In doing so, Woodward and Bernstein reaffirmed the responsibility of the press in its watchdog role of the government. By keeping the public informed and raising awareness of the true details of the break-in, the reporters were able to bring the issue to the forefront of the Senate's view and ensure that government officials were held accountable. Their work undoubtedly shaped the way Watergate played out and ushered in a new standard of reporting against which government scandals have since been judged. As modern media navigates new challenges, the legacy of Watergate serves as a powerful reminder of the press's crucial role in democracy. The right of the press to publish freely without government interference, which had been contested just a few years prior in the 1971 Pentagon Papers case, was ultimately what laid the foundation for the Washington Post reporting and the subsequent exposure of government corruption. Today, the lessons of Watergate remain as relevant as ever. In an era where misinformation, political division, and attacks on the press are common, the need for a free and responsible press continues to be a pillar of democracy, ensuring that the public remains informed and those in power are held to account. The work of Woodward and Bernstein serves as a reminder of the power of a free press in acting as a check against the government and its responsibility to work as an informant for the people.